Burkina Faso awoke in silence. Not a normal silence, but one that pressed like a weight on every chest. For the first time since taking power, President Ibrahim Traoré was missing. No public appearance, no statement, no trace. The presidential convoy remained parked. His inner circle offered no explanation. And by the second day, fear settled deep in the capital. Had there been a coup? Was he taken? Or worse, was he dead? News outlets from Paris to Washington whispered the same theory. An internal power struggle had removed the man who dared to challenge the global order. Social media lit up with speculation. Analysts pointed to a pattern: bold African leaders disappearing after defying Western influence. The whispers grew louder. Soldiers at key checkpoints were doubled. Phones stopped working in some government buildings. Something was very wrong. By nightfall, unease turned into chaos. Foreign embassies activated emergency protocols. A French news anchor dared to call it the beginning of a silent collapse. But on the streets, it wasn't collapse. They feared it was betrayal. Where was Traoré? Who was really in charge? And why was the government so quiet? By the morning of the third day, the silence had become unbearable. Then something snapped. Thousands of people flooded the streets of Ouagadougou. Not in anger at Traoré, but in defiance of the idea that he could be erased without consequence. Young men climbed atop burned-out cars, waving flags. Women chanted old resistance songs. The air pulsed with fury and faith. "Africa is not for sale," they screamed. "We want our leader back." At first it looked like chaos, but this was not rebellion. It was resurrection. In front of the National Assembly, an old war veteran with a faded uniform stood on a crate and shouted into a megaphone, "We will not go back to chains. Not gold chains, not dollar chains, not any chains." The crowd roared in reply. News footage showed civilians surrounding foreign-owned businesses demanding they leave African soil. A few embassies shut their gates. Whispers of anti-Western sentiment now became roars. Graffiti sprayed across city walls read, "No IMF, no NATO, only Africa," and still no word from the palace. No sight of Traoré, yet something had shifted. The people were no longer waiting to be saved. They were ready to fight for something bigger than any president, their future. Then came the night. Most had given up hope. Rumors of Traoré's death had reached even rural villages. Ouagadougou stood still as if holding its breath. But at exactly 11:46 p.m., an unmarked aircraft pierced the darkness above the capital. It made no radio contact. It bore no flag. And yet, the military cleared an entire runway for it. Those who lived near the base reported something strange. Total blackout. No lights, no movement, just wind and waiting. The plane touched down like a ghost. No media were allowed. Even soldiers weren't told what was happening. But a single image leaked: Traoré stepping off the ramp, flanked by men in black coatsmen who did not look Burkina. One had a pin on his chest, a red star inside a circle. Speculation exploded. North Korea, Iran, Russia, Cuba. But who they were wasn't as terrifying as what it meant. Traoré had vanished, not by force, but by choice. He had not been overthrown. He had been negotiating. And now he had returned. But not alone. The next morning, the silence finally broke, not with answers, but with a press alert that read, "A message from the president will be delivered at 8 p.m. And the world braced itself. The clock struck 8 p.m., and screens across Burkina Faso lit up. President Traoré stood Tokum, unshaken, eyes steady. Behind him, no ministers, no advisors, just the national flag and a new emblem no one recognized. He spoke slowly, clearly. "We have entered a new era, an era of true sovereignty." Then, silence until he dropped the first bombshell. Burkina Faso is forming a new economic and defense alliance outside of Western influence. No one had expected him to say it out loud. No one had ever dared. Over the next few minutes, Traoré revealed just enough to shake the world. A new payment system, independent of the dollar. Joint military exercises with unnamed strategic allies. Technology and infrastructure support from partners who respect our dignity. He never said their names, but everyone watching understood. He wasn't begging for help anymore. He was choosing sides. Behind the scenes, documents had been signed that night. One dealt with rare earth minerals, one with satellite defense coordination, one with gold. The U.S. State Department refused to comment. French officials expressed deep concern, and in African capitals, phones rang non-stop. What had Traoré just done? But in Ouagadougou, the people weren't afraid. They were ready. The world was on edge as a groundbreaking announcement reverberated across the globe. From the heart of West Africa, the government of Burkina Faso released a statement that would send shockwaves through every continent. In an unexpected move, President Ibrahim Traoré and his administration declared the formation of a new international alliance, the Pan-African Sovereign Pact. This was not just a political gesture. It was a defiant rejection of the influence of Western powers and a bold step towards financial security and resource independence for African nations. The Pan-African Sovereign Pact was described as a coalition built on the values of self-determination, sovereignty, and collective prosperity. According to the official statement released from the presidential palace, the alliance aimed to counterbalance the dominance of Western powers that had historically influenced the continent's economic and political landscapes. For years, Western financial institutions like the IMF and NATO's military alliances had held significant sway over African affairs. This new pact promised to reverse that power dynamic, enabling member nations to forge their own paths free from external interference. However, the details surrounding the members of this alliance remained a closely guarded secret. Speculation ran rampant. Would it consist of Burkina Faso's neighbors? Would major players like Mali and Niger, who had previously voiced dissatisfaction with Western-led policies, join the coalition? The international community was left in suspense, trying to piece together clues from the limited information available. As the world's financial institutions scrambled to assess the impact of this unexpected announcement, urgent meetings were convened. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, NATO, and various Western governments called emergency sessions to discuss the implications of the formation of this new alliance. The prospect of a united sovereign Africa represented a threat to their long-standing dominance over the continent's resources and economic systems. The ripple effects of the Pan-African Sovereign Pact were felt immediately. Financial markets reacted nervously, with stocks fluctuating wildly as analysts tried to anticipate the next moves of the African nations involved. In political circles, many began to question the future of foreign aid, trade agreements, and military alliances in Africa. But the most significant question was, what did this mean for Africa's future? Was this the beginning of a new era of autonomy and prosperity for the continent? Or was it the first sign of geopolitical instability? Only time would tell. The world held its breath as the geopolitical landscape of Africa seemed on the brink of a major shift, one that could forever alter the global order. The announcement of the Pan-African Sovereign Pact reverberated beyond the halls of political power, sweeping through the streets of Burkina Faso's capital, Ouagadougou here. The atmosphere was electric. For the people, this was not just a diplomatic move. It was a symbol of triumph, a rallying cry for a new chapter in their nation's history. On the evening of the declaration, President Ibrahim Traoré stood on the balcony of the presidential palace, his figure silhouetted against the fading golden hues of the African sun. Below, thousands gathered in the streets, their faces lit by the soft glow of torches and banners that waved in the air. There was a palpable sense of optimism, a belief that they had reclaimed their future. The air was thick with a simple gesture. Traoré raised his hand, signaling to the crowd. Silence swept over the masses as they turned their eyes toward him. Then, in a voice that echoed across the square, he spoke. "We have taken back our dignity. We have taken back our sovereignty. This is just the beginning." His words sent a ripple of excitement through the crowd, who erupted into cheers, their voices rising in unison. For the people of Burkina Faso, the moment was more than just political. It was deeply personal. The years of colonial influence, of external meddling, of economic control, all of it seemed to fade into the background as they celebrated the dawn of a new era. Tears flowed freely, not of sorrow, but of hope, as they shouted in unison, "We are back!" News outlets across the world turned their attention to West Africa. The international news channels carried the live broadcast, their anchors framing the events with a mixture of awe and skepticism. One anchor's words resonated with many. A new world order may have just begun in West Africa. As the camera panned over the jubilant crowd, it was clear that for Burkina Faso and the broader African continent, This was more than just a victory. It was the birth of something much larger. A new era of leadership, unity, and autonomy was unfolding before their eyes. But was it truly the beginning of a new world order, or was it the first of many challenges to come? Only time would tell. For now, the people celebrated their triumph was sweet, and the future gleamed with promise. The story of President Ibrahim Traoré and the formation of the Pan-African Sovereign Pact holds a powerful lesson for the world. It underscores the importance of sovereignty, unity, and self-determination in shaping the future of nations. By rejecting the influence of external powers and forging a path based on collective African interest, Burkina Faso demonstrated the strength that comes from standing together as a united front. The creation of this alliance is a testament to the resilience of a people who, despite centuries of external control, were determined to reclaim their future. For the global community, this event serves as a reminder of the shifting power dynamics in the world. No longer can the West claim unquestioned dominance over the affairs of the African continent. As the people of Burkina Faso cheered, they sent a message to the world. Africa's voice is stronger than ever, and its nations are ready to chart their own course. The lesson is clear. True strength lies in unity, in recognizing the value of self-determination, and in the courage to challenge the status quo. In this new world, the choices of sovereign nations will no longer be dictated by foreign interests, but by their own aspirations for a better future.